Bitcoin's price has been sideways and choppy for almost 3 months now, and many of you are asking, when moon? With explosively historic ETF numbers, increasing institutional and nation-state adoption, and the tick-tock next block of programmatic scarcity, you may ask, how is Bitcoin not well into the six figures yet? Today, I'll dive into the unique market dynamics of Bitcoin as we explore the rule of 10 days, and how to prepare yourself for the volatility to come. Welcome to Bitcoin Daily. I'm Hurley, Director of Content here at Swan, and again, I'm covering for Dante while he's away on vacation with his family this week. Now, we've seen several comments from new subscribers asking why the Bitcoin price has been sideways for so long. After an absolutely explosive February and March, where we saw the price nearly double after the ETF launch, we've since cooled off significantly, and we are now chopping sideways and consolidating under $70,000. So what gives? Why is the price so crabby, and what will be the catalyst for the next big breakout? We'll get into that in a second, but first let's look at some notable news for the day. First off, there's no secret the spot Bitcoin ETFs have been absurdly successful. And just to give some context to this statement, this is from Eric Balchunas, a Bloomberg ETF analyst. Only one ETF in history reached 20 billion in assets in under 1,000 days, and it was the JP Morgan Equity Premium Income ETF, and it did it in 985 days. IBIT, the BlackRock spot Bitcoin ETF, is just a few $1 million away from the $20 billion mark, and it's only been available for 137 days of trading. With now 11 straight days of inflows across the ETFs, IBIT will likely reach this milestone in the coming days or weeks. We're still waiting on official inflow numbers, but it's looking more like IBIT is going to surpass GBTC as the largest holders of Bitcoin across the ETFs. Now to some unfolding news that we talked about yesterday. Semler Scientific stock is up a whopping 36% since announcing the purchase of $40 million in Bitcoin for their company treasury. Swan CIO Hafa Zaguri says, pre-coiner public companies take notice. In 10 years, companies like Apple will need to have a very well thought out explanation on how they missed this trend while being immersed in the tech sector. As Preston Pish has said, we are in the early stages of an all-out speculative attack on a totally overvalued stock market. Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy clearly have a huge head start, but companies like Semler Scientific and Metaplanet out of Japan are just the latest to catch on. What happens when this trend becomes blatant and we get all-out corporate treasury FOMO? In another developing story we talked about yesterday, Donald Trump is reportedly in talks and exploring Bitcoin to address the ballooning US national debt if he's elected. This is similar to what independent presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr. proposed last year in his rough plan of using a basket of commodities, including Bitcoin, to backstop the US debt. It's really interesting to see Bitcoin and the US debt problem becoming more and more talking points in the upcoming election. This is just the very beginning of where I see the Bitcoin game theory leading, and that's nation-state adoption FOMO. Here's a list of the current nation-state holdings of Bitcoin, with the US and China leading the pack. Imagine what this will look like in 4 years' time. So after all that bullish news, let's get back to the price. Why has it been so boring and sideways for the past 3 months? Well, there might be light at the end of the tunnel, because notorious bullcrab Dr. Jeff Ross had this to say: the pieces are falling into place for the next short-term exponential run higher for Bitcoin. The only thing still missing is the liquidity tailwind. Once this trend changes, buckle up. So when will this next liquidity tailwind take us on the next ride up? Your guess is as good as mine, but if this is your first cycle, heed this advice. Short-term price action in Bitcoin is noise. It's always best to look at long-term indicators like we've talked about today in all investment assets, but especially Bitcoin. And as we've talked about many times on this show, the long-term indicators of Bitcoin are very bullish. But let's talk about the market dynamics of Bitcoin and its trademark volatility. Bitcoin price historically follows a rule called the rule of 10. What this means is that the majority of Bitcoin's yearly gains happen across just 10 days. If you miss those days, you miss out on most of Bitcoin's returns. This has been a trend since 2013, and it seems to be happening again in 2024. This also means that most of the year, Bitcoin's price is sideways and down. But on those 10 best days, the price often goes parabolic. This is a prime example of why you do not want to trade this asset, unless you like losing your money and going insane. Just buy, hold, buy more on the dips, and enjoy the ride. I love this clip of James Lavish giving his overview of his short-term outlook of Bitcoin this year on a recent episode of Swan Signal Live.
Over the course of this year and next, we're going to see a lot of institutional investors get their head around this and start establishing 1%, 2%, 3% positions in Bitcoin using these ETFs. And some of them will, especially family offices and smaller and hedge funds, perhaps smaller institutions, will get their own ability to buy Bitcoin without having to use the ETFs, which will just expand on that. And that will mean that they're getting great comfort in it and understanding around it, and getting comfortable with the risk of actually owning it themselves. So, but I think that that's going to continue, and so we're going to see this kind of trickle right now of institutions. We're going to turn that's going to turn into a kind of a stream and a flow, and then a steady flow, and just like a steady flow of a river of money that's coming into the space as these institutions get their head around it. Because like I said, they're going to take a 0.5% to 1% position. They'll stare at it on their sheets every single day until they decide whether they want to sell it completely or make it a full position of 2, 3, 4%. And that's where kind of we're headed. And so if you think about it in those terms, just go back to first principles. That just means that more money is coming into the space, that Bitcoin's price should rise accordingly. And to whatever multiplier you want to put on it, we've all talked about multipliers, but whatever you want to put on it because of the liquidity that's there now, I do believe that Bitcoin is going to crest the six-figure mark. It's going to be over $100,000 at some point later this year. That's my belief. The only caveat to that is if we do run into a hard downturn economically here, which I believe is a distinct possibility. It's a distinct possibility that we have some sort of event here where you have a washout of some sort of financial or perhaps an insurance or something institution that wipes out and takes down a number of institutions with it, or threatens to in an act of contagion. And in that case, I see us having a kind of a steep drop off and then a V recovery, because again, go back to the other first principle is the treasury market must stay liquid, and they will print to make sure it does. So if it does dip down from here and we have a sharp drawdown, I believe that would be a buying opportunity, because I do believe that the Fed and the Treasury will come back to the rescue and print more money, and they'll print more than they ever have before in multiples of it, because they have to keep this thing liquid. So that's the only caveat. That's the only question. And how long that takes, when that happens, anybody's guess. And I do believe there will be volatility in Bitcoin, but I believe that volatility will continue on the upside. And that's why I'm so excited about the opportunities ahead.
So you heard the man. Just get exposure to Bitcoin, hold, and if the price dumps, which you should always be prepared for, buy more. This consolidation period is a great opportunity to buy before the next spike up. And you can buy your first or your next $10,000 in Bitcoin through swan.com with no fees. So check out swan.com or download the app at swan.com/app. That's all for today. I'm Hurley, and in the words of the late great Hunter S. Thompson, buy the ticket, take the ride.